Marcus "Iron Beast" Rodriguez was one of the world's strongest CrossFit athletes and had never learned to respect anyone. When he encountered a 73-year-old legend, he would discover that all his medals were worthless. Marcus "Iron Beast" Rodriguez stood 6 feet 2 inches and weighed 220 pounds of pure muscle, every fiber sculpted through years of punishing CrossFit training. At 29 years old, he was a 3-time CrossFit Games champion, holder of multiple world records, and the undisputed king of functional fitness. His Instagram account, followed by 3.8 million people, showcased a physique that seemed carved from granite, bulging biceps covered in tribal tattoos, a chest that strained against every tank top, and abs that looked like they'd been chiseled by a master sculptor. But Marcus's most defining characteristic wasn't his impressive physical development. It was his absolute contempt for anyone who didn't meet his standards of elite fitness. In his world, there were only 2 types of people: those who could match his level of athletic performance, and those who were simply inferior human beings unworthy of his attention. The Iron Wolf CrossFit Box in Austin, Texas, was Marcus's domain. The 15,000-square-foot facility was a temple to extreme fitness, filled with the most advanced equipment money could buy: Olympic platforms, climbing ropes, assault bikes, and enough iron to build a small bridge. The walls were covered with Marcus's achievements, championship certificates, magazine covers, and photos of him deadlifting trucks and climbing mountains with refrigerators strapped to his back. Weakness is a choice, Marcus would tell his clients, his deep voice echoing through the gym with the authority of someone who had never experienced physical limitation. If you're not pushing your body to its absolute limit every single day, you're just taking up space in this world. This philosophy had made Marcus incredibly successful. His training programs commanded premium prices, his seminars filled auditoriums, and supplement companies paid him millions to endorse their products. He had built an empire around the idea that extreme physical fitness was the only measure of human worth. But Marcus's success had come with a price. He had become completely disconnected from any sense of humility or respect for those who had paved the way before him. To Marcus, anyone over 50 was automatically written off as past their prime, and anyone who couldn't deadlift twice their body weight was simply not serious about fitness. That Tuesday morning, Marcus was filming content for his YouTube channel, Beast Mode Unleashed, which had garnered 2.1 million subscribers who tuned in to watch him demolish workout challenges and critique other athletes. His camera crew had become accustomed to his routine: film him destroying some impossible workout, then have him deliver a motivational speech about mental toughness and physical supremacy. "Today we're testing a workout that would break most people," Marcus announced to the camera, his voice carrying the confident swagger that had made him famous. 5 rounds of 50 burpees, 100 kettlebell swings, and a 400-meter sprint. Most humans would quit after round 1. Let's see what a real athlete looks like. As Marcus began his workout, moving through the exercises with machine-like precision and inhuman endurance, he was unaware that a small group had entered the gym quietly through the side entrance. Among them was a man whose presence would soon shatter everything Marcus believed about strength, conditioning, and what it meant to be truly fit. Chuck Norris, at 73 years old, still carried himself with the unmistakable bearing of a lifelong martial artist. Dressed in simple gray workout clothes and white training shoes, he moved with the controlled grace of someone who had spent decades perfecting the mechanics of human movement. He was visiting Austin as part of a tour promoting youth fitness programs, and his local contact had suggested they stop by Iron Wolf to see one of the city's most famous training facilities. Chuck's group included his longtime friend and coordinator, David Park, a former Marine who had worked with Chuck for 15 years, and Sarah Martinez, a sports journalist who was documenting Chuck's continued involvement in fitness education at his advanced age. "This place has quite a reputation," Sarah said as they looked around the impressive facility. "Marcus Rodriguez is considered one of the most dominant CrossFit athletes in history." Chuck nodded thoughtfully, watching Marcus complete his workout with obvious admiration for the young man's athletic ability. "Impressive physical conditioning," he observed. "That level of fitness requires tremendous dedication." David, who had trained with elite athletes throughout his military career, was equally impressed by the display. "The guy's a machine. Look at that intensity." As Marcus finished his final round, sweat pouring down his muscular frame but barely breathing hard, he noticed the small group observing from near the entrance. His ego, always hungry for new audiences, immediately perked up. These looked like potential clients or perhaps media representatives who had come to witness his legendary training methods. Marcus approached the group with the confident stride of someone accustomed to being the most impressive person in any room. "Welcome to Iron Wolf," he said, his voice still strong despite the intense workout he'd just completed. "I'm Marcus Rodriguez. You here for training or just checking out how real athletes work?" "Actually," Sarah said, "we're here with Chuck Norris. He's in town promoting youth fitness programs, and we wanted to see some of Austin's top training facilities." Marcus's eyes settled on Chuck with the dismissive assessment he typically reserved for people he considered physically irrelevant. Here was a 73-year-old man in basic workout clothes, clearly not in the kind of extreme physical condition that Marcus respected. The fact that people were treating this elderly gentleman like someone important struck Marcus as both amusing and mildly irritating. "Chuck Norris," Marcus said with a patronizing smile. "Right, the movie guy. Dude, I grew up watching your films. Walker, Texas Ranger was classic stuff." Chuck extended his hand with polite respect. "Thank you. I understand you're quite accomplished in competitive fitness." Marcus shook Chuck's hand, noting with condescending satisfaction that the older man's grip, while firm, lacked the crushing power that Marcus associated with true strength. "Three-time CrossFit Games champion," Marcus said with pride. "Currently hold world records in multiple categories. I've basically redefined what human fitness looks like in the 21st century." "That's genuinely impressive," Chuck replied. "Competitive fitness requires tremendous mental and physical discipline." "Mental discipline, sure," Marcus agreed, warming to his favorite topic. "But let's be honest, it's really about pushing your body beyond what most people think is possible. Modern training methods, sports science, nutritional optimization. We understand human performance now in ways that previous generations couldn't even imagine." Sarah sensed an interesting dynamic developing and subtly signaled her cameraman to start recording. This could make for compelling content, the intersection of old-school fitness philosophy and modern athletic extremism. Marcus, noticing the camera, immediately shifted into performance mode. "I mean, no disrespect to your generation, Mr. Norris, but fitness has evolved tremendously since your era. What passed for being in shape 30 or 40 years ago, well, it's just not comparable to the standards we maintain today." Chuck listened thoughtfully, showing no sign of offense at the implicit criticism. "Standards certainly have changed. What would you say defines true fitness in your view?" Marcus's eyes lit up. This was exactly the kind of question that allowed him to demonstrate his expertise and philosophy. True fitness is about measurable performance metrics. How much weight can you move? How fast can you complete complex movement patterns? How efficiently can your cardiovascular system function under extreme stress? Everything else is just recreational activity. "Those are certainly important markers," Chuck agreed. "What about other aspects? Balance, flexibility, coordination, mental resilience under pressure?" Marcus waved his hand dismissively. "Look, those things matter for general wellness, but when we're talking about elite performance, it comes down to raw physical capability. Can you deadlift 500 pounds? Can you complete a brutal workout that would hospitalize average people? That's what separates real athletes from weekend warriors." Chuck nodded slowly, his expression remaining neutral, but his eyes showing a depth of consideration that Marcus completely missed. "So you believe physical capacity is the primary measure of an athlete's worth?" "Absolutely," Marcus replied without hesitation. "I respect what you accomplished in your time, Mr. Norris, but let's be realistic. You're what, 70-something? Your cardiovascular system, muscle mass, recovery capacity, they're all operating at a fraction of what they once were. That's just biology. Age catches up with everyone." David shifted uncomfortably, recognizing that Marcus was venturing into disrespectful territory, but Chuck remained perfectly calm, even curious. "You're right that age affects certain physical capacities," Chuck said. "What would you think about demonstrating some of these fitness principles you've developed?" Marcus's ego practically vibrated with excitement. This was perfect content, him showcasing modern training methods to a famous but physically outdated celebrity. His social media followers would love this kind of generational contrast. "I'd be honored," Marcus said, though his tone suggested he expected to be doing the honoring. "What did you have in mind?" "I could show you some of our advanced movement patterns, maybe a conditioning circuit that demonstrates what peak human performance looks like." "Actually," Chuck said with gentle patience. "I was thinking we might explore different approaches to the same concept. You demonstrate your methods, and perhaps I could share some techniques from traditional training." Marcus grinned with barely concealed condescension. "Sure, that could be interesting. Like a comparison between modern science and traditional methods. Educational for everyone watching." Sarah exchanged a glance with David, both recognizing that Marcus had no idea what he was setting himself up for. But Chuck seemed perfectly willing to let the young man continue his assumptions. "Excellent," Chuck said. "What would you suggest as a good test of functional fitness?" Marcus didn't hesitate. "Burpees. They're the ultimate measure of total body conditioning, cardiovascular efficiency, and mental toughness. They incorporate strength, endurance, coordination, and the kind of suffering that separates real athletes from pretenders." "Burpees it is," Chuck agreed. "What would you consider a meaningful challenge?" Marcus thought for a moment, calculating numbers that would demonstrate his superiority while not being so extreme as to risk injury to an elderly participant. "How about this? We each do as many burpees as we can in 5 minutes. Clean form, full range of motion. No rest breaks allowed." Chuck nodded. "That sounds reasonable. Should we set up some basic parameters for fair comparison?" "Just do your best, Mr. Norris," Marcus said with fake encouragement. "The goal isn't to compete with someone my age and conditioning level. Just show people that staying active is important at any stage of life." The patronizing tone in Marcus's voice was unmistakable, but Chuck simply smiled and began some light stretching to prepare for the challenge. His movements were fluid and controlled, showing the kind of mobility that most people half his age couldn't achieve, but Marcus was too focused on his own preparation to notice. As Marcus went through his pre-workout routine, dynamic warm-ups, activation exercises, and psychological preparation techniques developed by sports scientists, Chuck stood quietly, centering himself with the kind of meditative focus that came from decades of disciplined practice. "Whenever you're ready," Chuck said simply. Marcus set his timer and positioned himself at one end of the gym's open floor area. 5 minutes starting now. Marcus exploded into action with the ferocious intensity that had made him famous. His burpees were technically perfect: explosive jump, smooth drop to plank position, push-up with full chest-to-floor contact, explosive return to standing. His pace was relentless, fueled by years of conditioning that had taught his body to function efficiently even under extreme metabolic stress. For the first minute, Marcus maintained a pace that would have destroyed most trained athletes. His form remained crisp, his breathing controlled, his movement economical. This was what peak human conditioning looked like, the result of a lifestyle completely devoted to physical excellence. But as Marcus continued his demonstration of fitness supremacy, something strange began to happen. Chuck, working steadily beside him, wasn't falling behind. In fact, the 73-year-old seemed to be maintaining an identical pace with movements that looked almost effortless. Marcus increased his intensity, drawing on the competitive fury that had carried him through 3 CrossFit Games victories. His burpees became more explosive, his transitions more rapid. Sweat began to pour down his face as his body shifted into the anaerobic zone that separated elite athletes from recreational exercisers. Chuck continued his steady rhythm, his breathing even, his movements fluid and controlled. There was no apparent strain in his face, no signs of the cardiovascular stress that should have been overwhelming someone his age. If anything, he seemed to be getting warmer as the exercise continued. By the 3-minute mark, Marcus was beginning to feel the metabolic demands of his pace. His form remained excellent, but the effortless explosiveness was requiring more conscious effort to maintain. His breathing had shifted from controlled to labored, and his muscles were beginning to flood with the lactate that comes from extreme exertion. Chuck remained steady, his pace unchanged, his form perfect. The rhythm of his movement had an almost meditative quality, as if he were drawing energy from the exercise rather than being depleted by it. At 4 minutes, Marcus was in full survival mode. His technique was still sound, but every burpee now required significant mental effort to complete. His vision began to tunnel slightly as his cardiovascular system worked at maximum capacity to deliver oxygen to screaming muscles. Chuck looked like he could continue indefinitely. With 30 seconds remaining, Marcus summoned every ounce of willpower and conditioning he possessed, pushing through the kind of physical suffering that had defined his entire career. His final 30 burpees were completed through pure mental toughness, his body operating beyond what should have been possible. The timer rang, and Marcus collapsed to the floor, his chest heaving as he gasped for air. Sweat pooled beneath him as his body tried to recover from the metabolic assault he had just endured. He had completed 178 burpees in 5 minutes, a number that would have impressed any fitness professional in the world. Chuck finished his final burpee and stood calmly, his breathing elevated but controlled. He had completed 180 burpees, and looked like he could have continued for another 5 minutes without significant difficulty. Marcus lay on the floor, staring at the ceiling as the implications of what had just happened slowly penetrated his oxygen-deprived brain. A 73-year-old man had not only matched his pace but had actually outperformed him while appearing to exert significantly less effort. "That was excellent work," Chuck said, offering Marcus his hand to help him up. "Your conditioning is truly impressive." Marcus accepted the help and stood unsteadily, his worldview experiencing the kind of fundamental shift that only comes from encountering something that challenges everything you thought you knew. "I don't understand," Marcus gasped, still trying to recover his breath. "How is that possible? Your age, the science says." Chuck smiled with the patience of someone who had spent decades understanding the difference between theory and practice. "Science is very important, Marcus, but so is experience. Your training methods are excellent for developing certain types of physical capacity. But fitness isn't just about pushing harder, it's about training smarter." "But you're 73, Marcus said, as if stating the obvious would somehow restore his understanding of how the world worked. "I am," Chuck agreed, "but I've been training consistently for over 50 years. Not just my muscles, but my breathing, my mental focus, my ability to remain calm under stress." "You trained your body to work harder. I trained mine to work more efficiently." Marcus looked around the gym, his domain, the place where he was supposed to be the undisputed master of all things fitness-related. Suddenly, all his equipment, his records, his social media following seemed less impressive than they had 5 minutes earlier. "Your technique was flawless," Chuck continued. "Your conditioning is genuinely exceptional. But you were fighting the exercise, using strength and willpower to overcome discomfort. I was working with the movement, using breath control and mental focus to stay relaxed even under physical stress." Sarah, who had been filming the entire encounter, recognized that she was documenting something special, not just a physical demonstration, but a teaching moment that revealed something profound about the nature of true fitness. "What you've built here is impressive," Chuck said, gesturing around the facility. "But remember that the strongest foundation isn't built on dominance over others. It's built on mastery of yourself." Marcus nodded slowly, his competitive arrogance beginning to give way to something he had rarely experienced, genuine curiosity about learning from someone else. Would you be willing to teach me?" Marcus asked, his voice lacking its usual commanding confidence. Obviously my methods work, but what you just demonstrated, I've never seen anything like it." Chuck studied the young man thoughtfully. "Teaching requires humility from both teacher and student. Are you prepared to question everything you think you know about strength and conditioning?" Marcus looked around his gym one more time, at all the trophies and certificates and photos that had defined his identity for years. Then he looked back at Chuck, who had just shattered his understanding of human potential with nothing more than perfect form and 50 years of wisdom. "Yes," Marcus said simply. "I'm ready to learn." Over the following months, Marcus's approach to fitness underwent a complete transformation. Under Chuck's guidance, he learned that true strength wasn't about dominating workouts, but about developing the kind of comprehensive physical and mental conditioning that could be sustained over decades rather than years. His social media content evolved from pure physical intimidation to education about sustainable training methods, mental resilience, and the importance of respecting the accumulated wisdom of previous generations. His follower count grew to 5.2 million, but more importantly, his influence began to elevate the entire fitness community rather than just promoting his own superiority. A year later, Marcus would tell interviewers, "I thought I knew what peak performance looked like. Chuck Norris taught me that real strength isn't about how much weight you can lift or how fast you can move. It's about how efficiently your body and mind can work together, and how long you can maintain that efficiency." The video of their burpee challenge became one of the most watched fitness demonstrations in internet history, not because of its spectacle, but because it showed something that transcended physical performance. The moment when arrogance encounters wisdom and chooses to learn rather than defend itself. And sometimes, the most profound lessons about strength come not from lifting heavier weights, but from understanding that true power has less to do with dominating others and more to do with mastering the endless potential within yourself.